Thanks for coming. Didn't expect to see so many people and some lovely, friendly faces. If you guys wonder how a person like me gets a job at Brown University, look only to Wendy Edwards, who figured out a way to sneak me into the system. Let's see. This is about 20 minutes, right? We're thinking? Okay. I'll try to, Scott Ilario. Hey, Marguerite. I'll try to be brief because I love questions. And so my name is RaMell. I try to work between Rhode Island and Alabama very intentionally. If you guys know anything about me, it probably is that my work is like very sort of Southern based. And I look at that space as the sort of cul-de-sac for Black American identity. And with that seems like ripe ground to, I hate saying new because like relatively everything's new depending on your, relationship to the scale of it. Like granularly things are new, but large scale things aren't new. But there is something about a possibility for a sort of new grammar or a new aesthetic or a new relationship between Black visuality and the larger current trajectory of Black visuality, which I think is really grounded in Western knowledge production and a sort of Eurocentric mode of logic based on, maybe even most representative by like these countries are third world and these cultures don't have as much to contribute to, enlightenment relative to the rational way in which we think sort of science and Christianity can get us to a type of meaning that is useful for human well-being. That being said, this show is kind of built from a book that I made with my studio manager, who will come up. Bobby Davis is his name. Where's Bobby? So this is Bobby. He can speak for himself, but he probably won't now. Anything that I make, like physically, from like these guys to the crate, Return to Origin, to something that most don't know, which is, if you guys have seen Nickel Boys, there's a box. Who's seen Nickel Boys? Wow, cool. If you guys also want to know how that sonic majesty came to be, you can look to Scott Ilario, who is one of the composers on the project, who went to RISD with me at grad school. Can we give him a little clap? Yeah. His like artwork is equally as wonderful, and it's strange that he could, do things so profoundly. But the boxcar in the Nickel Boys film, Bobby built, and it's a strange thing to like make a production as large as Nickel Boys in the studio process. And during that process, we like ran out of days because I got COVID. It was just like a mess. So we had to push the boxcar scene outside of the production. And so the only way to do it was for like Bobby to essentially build this boxcar on the back of a trailer, and then we drove cross country for like 4 days, filming the inside of it, and whose legs are in it. And anyway, so this is Bobby. And so this book is called Spell Time, Practice, American Body. And it's kind of, it's almost a thesis built in the form of a sort of government document, a government sort of binding that kind of allows me to reflect on trying to revisualize what it means to be a person of color in the South, and that being a new sort of starting ground. So the name of this show is also Spell Time, Practice, American Body, but we crossed out, which ones did we cross out?
Practice American Body.
Yeah, we crossed out Practice American Body, essentially meaning that this one is about spelling and this one is about time. And all the work can be categorized in any of these categories, but just as a sort of framework for us to organize things, that's kind of how we built this show. So we have another show up at the University of the South, Sewanee University. Yep. And that is also named Spell Time, Practice, American Body, but we crossed out Spell Time. And so that one's about Practice, American Body. So we have the Return to Origin crate in there, which is a project. Bobby built that box as well, where we shipped me from Rhode Island to Alabama. You want to say something? Okay.
That's your part.
Yeah. But if you guys want to get a bigger picture of the language of this exhibition as it emerges into the space, go to this book. So you can pass it around. But generally speaking, super generally, because I think there's something that David Campney He used to be the director of ICP. He said that he's like my favorite person to read about photography, but he said that he has a hard time talking about photography, but he can talk about individual photographs. I'm actually the opposite. I have a hard time talking about individual photographs, but I love talking about photography and trying to sort of open it up to an interpretation that is equal to its unknown purchase on the human imagination and human thought process and consciousness. You know, there's a strange thing. I mean, the way that I think about photography is I think about it as a type of memory, specifically as it relates to people of color, as a type of memory that is kind of quote unquote unnatural. And I don't know what natural means. I don't know what organic means. Like, these things are beyond my capacity as a person to think, but just taking that as the origin for thinking about itself, because the relationship between people of color and photography is one of misrepresentation, and then of course a sort of echoing of this misrepresentation across time and across meaning in a way that is irreversible. And so to me, I like to think about photography as a way of producing knowledge that is too rigid and too familiar, that sort of feeds the American stranger's imagination. The American stranger is a sort of proxy for the way that I think about a person thinking about the work that I'm making. And so if you think, like, it's like, what's the American stranger's visual constitution, right? Like, what does the American stranger think about, you know, a photograph of my mother as it escapes the family archive and floats out of the apartment or whatever and lands on the street, and they pick that up? Like, what does the American stranger see? Not what I see, what do they see? Because that's what photography is doing in a larger context. In a smaller context, it's doing, of course, what I hope it's doing when I take the photo. But anyway, thinking about photography as this unnatural intervention into the way in which we're supposed to be thinking about the world, which is one that's incredibly fluid, one that is constantly changing. Like, what if, and I speak about it this way because people don't. I love photography. I love it for its photojournalism. I love it for its archiving, for its indexicality, for all of its profundity. But in terms of thinking about its relationship to people of color, what if we're not supposed to be that stable? Like, what if we're supposed to be constantly evolving in the eyes of the American stranger and in ourselves? So with that being said, the way in which I came to understand what I was interested in photography in the South was making images that had a strategic ambiguity about them. Images that have a plurality about them, so that the American stranger is forced into a duality of clarity. So my favorite one that was like a groundbreaking in my own personal experience is this one here, called Dakisha and Marquise. And so I remember when I was taking this, Dakisha is a student of mine, was a student of mine, and her son in the background is also, is of course her kid. And the image that I wanted to make originally was, you know, very specific to Dakisha and myself. I know that she, you know, has X life difficulties and Y wife difficulties, so I wanted her to be holding her son upside down over her stomach on this porch in this light. I made that image. It was kind of like a little bit cheesy, maybe overly artistic. And so I asked Marquise to like do his thing, and Dakisha actually fell asleep right there. And so this is made with the 4x5 camera with chrome chrome film. And so I sat there and watched through the viewfinder while Marquise did his thing, and time passes and I'm like, I don't know what kind of image I'm gonna make. And then he goes back and he starts playing with these flowers, and I snapped the photo. And when I looked at it after it was developed, it taught me something, which was that images of people of color traditionally, as it relates to photo history, I believe, and super generally, have single use. They're very much single use, right? They're not in the world to be in multiple contexts and to be open to interpretation. They're trying to prove something. They're trying to prove a humanity. They're trying to prove some sort of relationship between the viewer, the photographer, and the person inside. And with strategic ambiguity in mind, it's how do you make an image that has a sort of positive and a negative? How do you make an image that is a sort of Rorschach test for your relationship to the Black community? It's hard to look at this image without thinking about the history of people of color lying on the ground in various contexts, right? But once again, it's just the person who's asleep. You don't know she's asleep. She looks like she could be in distress. She looks like she could be resting. So it forces you to finish the image. That's kind of how I approach making images in the South, where there's like a very specific thing that I'm thinking that someone will never get to, and then of course you're forced to contribute your imagination. So all the images, I think, are existing in some sort of relationship to that. There's some like this, in which and almost all the photographs are like, it's almost like you are witnessing them yourself. This one, it has like a reflexivity about it, where you're sort of questioning, for me, and you would never know this, and I would normally never talk about this, but like when I made this image of Shaquan, it was about like my insider-outsider relationship, right? Like she's looking at me, do I belong? Is it friendly? Did she know I'm there before she looked? Like that type of tension, and it offers that to you, also thinking about blackness as a Rorschach test. So the photographs do their thing. I think the most illustrative one, which was the first one I ever made in this series, was the one in which I'm holding the iPhone, which is, sorry, I'll wrap up soon, which is the sort of flagship for, I think, what I try to offer to people in terms of helping them, or students, in terms of helping them become artists who have their own voice, which is like trying to find someone's personal poetic. Like, what is your very specific relationship to the image and visuality equal to your very specific relationship to language? If we asked everyone here to write a poem about a rose, every poem would be different. But if I asked all of you guys to make an image about, I know most of you are artists here, so maybe it doesn't apply, but to take a photo of a rose, like most of the images would be very similar, if not the same, because we're not taught how to visualize our ideas. Culture sort of leads that. We have much more education as it relates to language. And so that one, it's like, oh, what is my relationship as a kid born in Germany to military parents who went to North Carolina, to visit my family, and that's my relationship to the South. And I grew up in Northern Virginia. Like, what's my relationship to the South? Like, how am I imbuing my expectations and my prejudices into what I think an image should be, and how I think these images should be performing in the imagination of the American stranger. This is one of my, probably one of the funnest, the most coincidental projects ever. If you guys know anything about this, which you probably don't, when I bought a house in 2017 in Valley, like close to Federal Hill, you guys know this, I don't know why I'm going into detail, maybe because I'm nervous. Victoria, this is my social crutch, so I needed you. If you wouldn't have let me do this, I would be super fidgety. So I bought a house, and in the garage, there was a safe. The safe's here, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, never mind. So I break open the safe after many years, and there's fucking bullets in it. Like, it was so unbelievable. And I stored it, and I was like, I have to make art somehow. So every bullet that I found, there were 5 different types. I had a photo conversation with them, and this is me sort of catching the bullets. And this was against Bobby's best. Bobby said, don't do this, but I did it anyway, which was glue the bullets to my hand with super glue. And then I closed it, and then it's gone, and I'm taking the bullets away. How romantic. This one is more like a sort of court scene. This is one of my favorite. This one's called Play, because these bullets were police grade, which was crazy. They're like property of whatever. And so it's yeah. So anyway, I buried these in tombs. And these tombs, Bobby and I made out of Alabama railroad ties. And this dirt, of course, is from Howell County, something that I got from William Christianberry, who has used a lot of dirt in his art. You guys have any questions? There's so much to talk about always, but I hope I gave you a brief explanation of stuff.
Thank you so much.
When talk about the big piece behind this wall with the haystack.
Bell cubic.
Oh, Bell cubic. I think one thing, and it's one of the theses of Nickel Boys, is it sounds pretentious, but if you're making work as a person of color, I'm sure you know this, but like everything is new. You know, like people haven't been had the freedom, the bandwidth to be making art in the way in which a lot of folks do now, and not enough folks do now. So in Nickel Boys, it's like I literally want to make images that no one has ever seen before, from the perspective of my own eyes down my own body as a proxy for Elwood and Turner. Here, it's how do I make images that I don't know what they're about, where I'm sort of questioning the relationship between the symbology that's happening in it. Like, it is about surprise, and it is about learning through making. I'm unsure what I've learned from that image yet, but it took a while for the gesture of my guy Cammy, who's underneath the tarp, to be strange enough to think that it contributed to the sort of ongoing conversation that I mentioned to you all. Yeah, it's really fun to take the guys out and do these random things. I'm like remembering like there was a spider under the tarp and he's like screaming and I'm like, Cammy, shut up. It's a long exposure. He's like, I'll never do this again. But yeah, I've tried for many years to figure out how to get hay bells in an image, but as you can see, the images are like Southern, but they're also not too Southern. Like I don't want to peddle in the sort of incredibly overt romanticism of the South, because I think that it's a mode of image making. Well, that's something I had to get over, because one of my favorite things to say, which I'm quite proud of, but was incredibly difficult going through that process, because I hadn't made any of the things you're seeing now. I just felt stranded on my own island. Was that I made images for 3 years in Hale County. Every day, like rapaciously, I mean like obsessive, dangerously obsessive. And you haven't seen any of those images because none of those images I thought were something other than an image that someone else would make. And to me, if someone else can make the image I'm making, then why the fuck am I making it, And after I made the image with the iPhone, I was like, oh, I need to be like more specific. I need to like tap into my own unknown, not what I call like the universal aesthetic, which are things that we know look good. Like I can make an image right now that I know people will like, but like, what is that image saying? It's saying perhaps things that I can't acknowledge that I'm not happy it's saying. So what are we talking about? Oh yeah, that was the bell. Yeah, question?
The other, like, kind of this photo.
Yeah.
What was your thought process? What do you pay attention to when you see it?
I like what do you pay attention to? Yeah, my work, I love perception. All of these buzzwords. I have a hard time taking photos of taking landscape images, and not because I don't think I can make them and have people like them. Once again, like I have a hard time thinking I'm saying something that someone hasn't said or that's valuable with it. And this one was an incredible. I was just overjoyed that it did something for me, and I couldn't help but like sort of revel in the contrast between the new planks and the old swamp. It's sort of like, to me, it was almost like a literal pirate's plank, like a sort of almost a tongue of some sort. And you're not allowed to jump off, but you're allowed to walk off. It's like, what's your entryway into the South? Are you comfortable just standing there and taking your images and leaving, or are you one who's going to get a little bit closer to the water? What's in the water? Why is there a fishing lure like hanging in the middle? I've gone back actually and tried to photograph this. I mean, all of my work is just basically all failure. It probably sounds ridiculous, but like all failure with an occasional good thing. Like I've tried to photograph this at least 9 times. Again, with like spending, because I shoot 8:10 now and it's live film, it's $50 a photo. It's crazy expensive. But none of them, they just didn't work. Like something's wrong with it, So no one will ever see those images. But yeah, this one's one of the most complex relationships to me between the past and the current.
When I'm not an artist, but
Yeah, you are.
No, I don't know. So I don't know if you can really answer this question because it's like maybe it's like picking your favorite kid. But what photo here means the most to you personally?
I can answer that question. And if I had kids, I could pick a favorite. Because I love them all equally, but it doesn't mean I don't like one more, Like, come on, let's be serious. Probably of the ones that are here, I would probably say, hands down, Antonio. This one right here. I think it was the hardest photo I've ever made before. And it was, to me, that's like, aside from the iPhone, it's like a thesis as well, where you're just forced into a relationship between your mood, your relationship to Black culture, and this narrative. Like, the combination of those three produces the meaning, I think if your mood changes, the image changes, I think if your relationship to Black culture changes, and somehow, and this is for people of color too, this is for Black folks, then the image, the narrative changes, That sort of almost mathematical affect theory relationship between meaning is like the best. Mm-hmm.
These all feel like kind of discrete moments. I'm wondering, like, how you go about, are these moments that you're discovering or observing, or are you creating?
Yeah. So I call myself a liberated documentarian, which to me means that I'm like no longer interested in the value system of like Western photojournalism or Western art making or whatever, where it's like, to take it adjacent but still relatively poignant. Like Hoop Dreams, when Steve James is making Hoop Dreams, he's not allowed to like pay to have the lights on of the people he's filming, right? Because that's going to compromise the ethics of the film. Are you fucking joking? What do you mean you're just going to like let these people's lights go off and continue filming? And then make a movie about how sad it is and then like go off and while you're presenting their life in a beautiful way, like employ this document as a trajectory or like the fuel for your career, but you're not going to put like what? There's something, I think like we live in a time in which photography and film are so have reinscribed reality. Like people know it's just not the same. So anyway, by whatever means necessary, like a lot of these are staged, a lot of them are found. Most often they're found after starting it being staged. Second, most often I see something like this, then I ask someone to redo it, because that moment that I had where I was like, whoa, how are you looking at me like that? Like I want to give to someone else. Those are my favorite ones where it's like, because a lot of these were taken like when we were on a school trip, where I see something and like I literally put the camera where my head was, which is essentially what Nickel Boys is, and you try to find that like moment of tension. Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your theories or thoughts behind the items that were in the safe?
Oh yeah, theories and thoughts. Man, I haven't really thought about any theories really. Yeah, well, because it like has a Santa Claus mask,
Right.
Which is to me is like compoundedly ironic because my mom used to paint Black Santas. And so if you look in the book, there's Black Santas in the book, isn't there? Yes. Yeah. Some of those were part of the larger show that went to the Ogden. And like, that's like a gut punch to me, this sort of hollow Santa mask. And it had that Confederate flag little thing in there that said the South will rise again. I mean, like, come on. Like, even aside from that, because I know that, people think that, and I know that people dream of that being the case. But like for me to find that and for that to like, for that to add to what I am constantly fighting against myself with, like, is this a worthwhile pursuit? Like making art and making films, and it seems obvious from the outside, but I'm I'm hard pressed to find an artist that you really, really talk to that is like every day they know what they're doing, or they're happy with what they've done, and they think that they're really, making a difference. Conceptually, of course, but the personal experience of making work is quite difficult, I find at least. And so that to me was like, I can always look back to this piece and just be like, obviously, someone dedicating most of their energy to thinking about these things is valuable. There was like a quarter in it, was like 1983, I think was the date on it. A solder thing.
We looked into the soldering iron, by the way.
Yeah?
And I think it's a circuit identifier.
Oh, damn. That makes sense. Because it doesn't, now that you say that, it looks nothing like a soldering iron, does it? Well, yeah. Well, that's even maybe more meaningful. The future is digital. You had a question, yeah?
Yeah, I don't really know how to phrase it, but it's about relationship
Mm.
with the people with whom you're making the photos.
Yeah.
And like how you navigate that over the time you're with them. And like you were talking about sort of participant, observer, belonging, othering, like with reference to this one.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, like, or like, in this example, did she see this? And was she like, I like that, I'm okay with you showing it?
Mm.
Like, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, well, I know you're not asking this, but it reminds me that I do this. When I sell the first print, I give the person 25%. And now some of the photos sell for a decent amount of money, so it's quite nice to like give someone $2K, and they're just like, whoa, we took that 8 years ago. And I'm like, here's your check. I do send them a 1099 though, and then they're like, what? I'm just kidding. That'd be ridiculous. It'd be so ridiculous. So one thing I found fascinating, I think all of my work is like one big question, I hope, in a material form. And I remember the first lesson was do we have item A in here? No? Item A is an image of an older woman with she's like touching her eye, and she's like dressed almost in her Sunday best on a bright and sunny day on a street. And I took that photo and I loved it so much. It was like, I just can't believe I did this. Like, whoa, I'll never do it again. And I show her the image and she's like, why would you do that? And I'm like, what do you mean? Art. And she's like, this is in her house. She's like, I'll show you a real photo. She takes me over to her mantle and opens up her family photo album and shows me pictures of her. She's like, this is a good photo of me. This is a good photo of me. And I'm like, oh yeah, of course. Why would she think that this is a good photo of her? Because it isn't. It's a good idea of a person being represented in this constellation, a thing I'm trying to do, but in terms of it representing something, of course, and her life, of course not. And so I'm glad that happened early on while making Hale County this evening, because it was good to learn immediately to separate what I think that I'm doing and what not only everyone else thinks I'm doing, but what the people that are in it are participating in from their perspective. Everyone in the images, I've shown them, and because the process is enjoyable and I think outside of their normal activities, they're always game and they have a good time. They don't pretend to know what they mean. I also don't pretend to know what they mean, but the creative process, I think, it's appreciated. And
It can mean different things, right?
Yeah.
Around you, to whomever.
Yeah. The funnest part, I wish you guys could be around. I mean, I think the only person in here who has been Bobby, when we're about to take a photo and it's what do you guys think we should do? It's just crazy. It's I'm like, guys, it's not gonna work. What else? Yeah, I think more to your question, to take it to the biggest possible stage in a way is making a documentary with the community, and then as relationships fray over time or even during the process, it becomes quite difficult to balance like respect and care and your intentions and what they, and I can never speak for the other person, but what they thought they were getting into and then what they're really into, and then, you know, the film does really well and I didn't get any money from it, but then the person wants money and you've already given them money and you can only help so much, but then now it's like a really muddy, constantly evolving relationship. And that's with one of the protagonists of Hell County This Morning, This Evening. Yeah, it's very, very, very difficult to like manage or to like, yeah. Scotty?
Yeah, kind of going off that, how do you feel working with fiction, or in fiction, like comparatively? Like, did you feel liberated in some way, though, like you didn't owe anything to the real people?
Man, working in fiction, I think it depends on, well, because Nickel Boys is based on the Dozier School for Boys, you know, my co-writer and I, Jocelyn Barnes, had a very specific, had a very specific conversation where we're like, who do we owe what to? Like, do we owe fidelity to Colson Whitehead's novel, to his characters, to his plot lines? Do we owe fidelity to the Dozier School for Boys? You know, this abstract idea of what their lives were? Do we owe fidelity to the Dozier document, which is this 120-something page, you know, forensic account made by Dr. Aaron Kimmerly, who's a forensic anthropologist? Like, where do we owe what to? So we decided we owe everything to the Dozier Boys, and, you know, built the film from that document using Colson's mythology. That was kind of the process. But I think in terms of, yeah, I kind of forgot your question.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're answering it in a way, like, I guess it wasn't.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Because you were, in a way, it's like it's a story, but it's not fiction, because the way you interpreted presenting it was about optics, the camera, the body, this exchange.
Yeah.
So you kind of complicated it for yourself.
Yeah.
So you didn't get an easy filmmaking experience.
Didn't, but that complication is quite nice, because it, I think that's almost what's missing fundamentally from fiction film, you know, is complexity.
Yeah.
But your question did remind me that, like, you know, working with someone like Anjanou Ellis Taylor, who is, you know, as good as it gets, I believe, and, you know, almost all her scenes were dramatic ones, and I don't know if she would call herself a method actor. I'm unsure exactly what it means, but it seems to be as close to what she is. And so she's going through, like, putting herself through the ringer to give the audience the full range of going from, you know, normal in the world to, like, realizing her child's dead. Like, that's a very extreme emotional swing. And you have to ask her to do it again. And that's what I found, like, almost impossible, you know, because who the fuck wants to traumatize someone, you know? And, like, that's literally what she's doing. She's going through trauma. Yeah.
This is a quick question. When you're making art, do you ever think about the audience who consumes it, specifically those who might want to portray these pieces as like fetishizations or like other, and not wanting to appeal to those who don't really care about learning, but just it as an image itself?
Yeah, for sure. I think my entire process emerges from this kind of conversation, thinking about the history of this fetishization, it being the sort of origin of black folks' image in, you know, larger Western zeitgeist. I think I don't believe in, you know, not thinking about the audience, and I don't believe in overthinking about the audience. You know, I think that there's some sort of balance you have to find for each project, for each idea, for each gesture. There's something, you know, people are going to fetishize, you know, like people are going to other. That's what people do. I think that we can maybe get to a point where that's not the case. So you kind of have to not situate the American stranger as a monolith, which also sounds a little bit almost counterintuitive. Like there's multiple versions of, you know, American strangers, and like which one are you trying to talk to? Is each piece trying to be as broadly interpreted as possible? Are you trying to, is your work trying to change the mind of someone who's born racist? I'm not trying to do that shit, you know? Like that's for someone else. That's a crazy task, you know? like my aim is to embed plurality into the mind of the American stranger, to allow them to fully understand as viscerally as possible that their perspective truth is perspectival. It is a point in a constellation of points of view, and it behooves them to be in conversations with ones that are far away from theirs, and they're just as valid and true as that person's, you know? And my mode is like all the stuff that you're kind of seeing. So yes and no.
When you were creating Nickel Boys, was it always that you were going to shoot it like from the first person angle, or were there any drafts that were like not from that angle, like you're like going out of your box with your photography? Or?
No, because yeah, I like to say that it could have been different. So I read the book, and like the first idea I had was point of view, and I like go to she was a producer at this point. She like wasn't my co-writing partner, Jocelyn, and I was like, I'm really thinking about point of view for this, and like we just started sort of talking about it, and then over the course of that conversation and like ruminating on it for many months, that just became the vision for the film. But if she would have been like, that's a bad idea, or I don't know, like I have no idea what would have happened, you know, because I would have been like, yeah, I was just kidding, like POV, who would do that, right? No way that would work, because that's more how I am, you know, like just trying to like backpedal. So it became, yeah, the film was imagined and visualized and written through that. But as you can see, like all of these images, you know, I don't use wide angle lenses. Like the lenses I use are pretty damn close to human perspective. Like they would be like almost DSLR 50s or like 35 millimeter 50s. Because I'm interested in social and human abstraction, but as it relates to individual lives and reality, like not, you know, for the sake of form or, which I think is also great. And the way to get that to me is to align the perceptual encounter of myself with the audience, because that's the only thing, that's what I know best, you know?
You made me weep, so you were very successful.
Yeah?
Yeah, I could cry, like, I sat in the Providence Place Mall food court crying for like 30 minutes after.
I'm so sorry, like I don't want people to be crying.
You feel like a horrible human being.
No, that's not the aim. Yeah, well, maybe you've got some confessions. Just kidding. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. Maybe a few more questions before.
We got one over here.
Yeah.
What challenges did you face when making Nickel Boys, and was there a point in production where you're like, shit, I should have just done it normally?
Oh, no. I mean, most of the challenges were pre-production, because like what you want for a scene or for a location is rarely what you get. Unless someone went out and did location scouting and you're choosing that place, which is, of course, how all films work, or most films work. What am I trying to say? The process was fun and relatively, like, when we're in production, relatively easy. Not easy. Yes. Yeah, tons of anxiety. It's tough, like working like 13, 14 hours a day. And not that people don't do that in way more, you know, labor-oriented spaces, but yeah, using your brain and being responsible, because every single decision goes through you. Every single one. So you're just answering questions the whole time, you know? And like giving direction, and that's taxing. Especially when things aren't going your way in scenes, or like you're like, in the script we wrote that we would have a young boy, 4 years old, 4 to 5 or 6, young black boy for this bus scene. Why are you showing me a 13-year-old girl who is like 2 feet taller? How, she can't fit under a seat, you know? We can't shoot the scene. And then so you're like, then you have to figure out, okay, we'll just take the seat out or do this. Like those types of things are actually kind of fun, I imagine. But those are the challenges, is just like making it work, because it's like it's an obscene amount of money, you know, like a large fraction of $1 million every day. So that's a lot at stake. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this talk. I'm curious about your relationship with language. This is such an evocative title, and the fact that you're playing with it with different shows and crossing out, like omission but presence.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about that, and then I'm also curious about what you're working on now. And these particular words, like how are they hold for you?
Yeah. Yeah, the relationship between language is I mean, I wish I was savvy enough to summarize something that was satisfactory, you know. I love linguists, I love rhetoric, I love poetry, I love like narrative prose. Language is kind of everything, but also it's clearly just a proxy. And I think, was it like Trinchi Minha or maybe like Deborah? You guys know the linguist that like used to teach at Georgetown? She did like a Bowery in two, it was like Deborah something. Maybe it was Trinchi Minha who said it. Someone was like, you know, you can only speak near something, you know? And I definitely hold that close to mind almost always. I think my relationship to language and visuality is probably best represented through like a sort of Allen Ginsberg's Howl, or a James Agee's Let Us Now Praise Famous Men, which you could argue that their unconscious, I don't know, thesis is that like language fails fundamentally, which we all know it does, but for those who have probably gone to the end of their own, maximize their own capacity with language, for them to get to the point to say that is a different level of relationship to language, that language fails, so I'll just give you all my language. I'll speak so florally, I'll speak so profoundly and so, you know, effectively and ineffectively that it'll get you as close to my capacity to get you close can do. And that's kind of my thing. It's like all about time and kind of giving everything. Like every word is an idea. Every, you know, sentence is the most important sentence. Every image is the most important image. If you guys watch Nickel Boys, the idea of the film is it's like a very photographic film. Like the thesis of the film is in every image. Like every image is supposed to be standalone. And for the title, spell is like obviously, you know, witchy, you know. And it's like the American spell. It's like everyone's in it, you know? But how do you spell that? And can you unspell it? Time, who knows what that is? Practice, sports. It's like like when we're young, you're like training your kids to be whatever they are, you know? American, it's all there, body. Yeah, it's kind of self-explanatory, but it was important because it started like as a really, really, really long kind of like Kara Walker title, but then it was like, oh, these 5 words, comma, 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 lets them each be a seed, and then also, yeah, sort of, what is it, concrete poetry? You know those, it's almost like a concrete poem in each word, but then also it germinates, you know? Cool, guys. Wait, one more question.
It's just a technical question, but do you have an approach to skin tones in terms of like lighting and like picking the right camera so it's
Yeah,
too washed out?
I do. My approach is black and white. I don't shoot Kodak. I only shoot Fuji. And it's only because of, you know, what we know as a Shirley card. And I'm sure they've made amends for, you know the Shirley card, yeah? I'm glad you said no so that I can tell people who also didn't know who wouldn't say they didn't. The Shirley card was a card that Kodak used to calibrate their film back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever. And Shirley was a white woman. And so they're making all of their alchemical decisions based on the hue of white skin. You know, fine, whatever. But they found when they photographed people of color, then it like horribly represented, which contributes to, you know, the phrase that I like to say that like black folks are sort of backlit by history. sort of cast an infinite silhouette. And so the reason why they started to care about black skin was because people who like Sears, who had furniture, were like, you know, this like oak isn't really coming out, you know, kind of just looks like tar, you know, and they're like, all right, I guess for the catalog, you know. So yeah, Fuji, because you know, folks from the Eastern tradition just had like a not white skin tone. It was just always calibrated differently. And I find that slide film that's Fuji, one, I don't like editing in Photoshop. I just don't care, you know. Everything pops. It's super saturated. You know, like these images, if I were to show you this 4x5 slide, it looks exactly like that, like one to one, you know. And so my goal when I'm like printing is trying to get it back to the original. And it's a positive, right? So it's a different relationship between the document and the photograph. You know, color negative film is not, it's the original, but it needs to be translated to be kind of viewable for like popular consumption. But these guys are one of one, you know? And for cinema, completely different. You know, that's like a process of working with Jomo Frey, who probably will be my DP forever, who's just like a genius DP. He has like a very sensitive relationship to, he's a man of color of himself and black folks over time in the history of cinema. And so we light to this, like our LUT for the film were these images. And we also work with this guy, Alex Bickle at Color Collective, who was the guy who colored Moonlight, which of course, and I'm unsure if you remember when you first saw that trailer, but there was nothing even close to like it in terms of the way in which people's, you know, interiority could be expressed just through the lighting on their body. Like it was just like a weird thing you didn't know was possible. Yeah. Cool. Thanks, guys.